Hey everybody, it's me, Crazyfrankie, and I'd like to welcome you to my Week 5 4 key game picks. Before we talk about Week number 5, not much quick... I don't want to get into too many thoughts on Week number 4, but if you look around the rest of the NFL and all 32 teams, we're down to only 2 undefeated teams left, and that is the Chiefs and the Vikings. Now, I don't know if the Vikings, despite the fact that they looked like they dominated the Packers in that first half of that game, but somehow the Vikings defense basically took some time off. They didn't take the Packers offense seriously in the second half, and the Packers offense, and Jordan Love, they almost came back and beat them. And you would think that with a Brian Flores defense here, it should be domination against the opponent, but yet somehow Brian Flores, I don't know what he did in the second half and what he told his defense, but they basically took the rest of the second half off when really they should have been putting the stranglehold on the Packers. The Packers should have been blown up by even a bigger score, and yet somehow they let them back into the game and they almost won. So, do I consider the Vikings as the best team in the NFL? No. After what I saw in the second half of that game against the Packers, I don't know if I buy the Vikings as a legit contender, even though despite the fact that Sam Darnold played very well in the first half, and yet the offense basically took the second half off. That, to me, raises some huge question marks. They should not be doing that. Or let alone there was something that maybe the Packers found, and they basically may have exposed them. Now, the Chiefs, on the other hand, is the other undefeated team. They only beat the Chargers by 7, and they even but obviously losing Rice for the season, or from what I've been hearing, he might be pretty much just looking like it's going to be a ACL injury or something like that. He could be done for the year. I don't have any word on that, but it looks like he might be done for the year, and that's a huge blow to that offense. And yet they somehow beat the Chargers by only a touchdown. And you got to wonder if this Chiefs team now has some other eyebrows and question marks. Now, right now, look, they're still favorites in the NFL to three-peat. But right now you got to wonder if that three-peat is starting to look shaky and starting to look like maybe the Chiefs are starting to show more of their vulnerabilities than we anticipated. But other than that, they're undefeated. Other things that happened in the league and all that. Lions played a great game. Lions and Seahawks went to another classic on Monday night. It was another high-scoring game. Lions defense, I don't know what's going on with their defense here, when really they allowed 500 yards of offense that the Seahawks and Geno Smith put on it. Sometimes, and you got to wonder, is the Seahawks offense a little better than we anticipated, or is there definitely something wrong with that Lions defense, which a lot of us praised before the season started, and now the Lions defense looked like they were the same defense from last year where there was question marks and how they blew that NFC Championship game because of their defense. I don't know. That's another question mark, I wonder. And when I look at some other teams, the Ravens basically made a statement against the Bills. Maybe the Bills are finally showing some vulnerabilities themselves, even though they're still in first place in the AFC East, and they had some injuries going into this game. Yeah, it was it's hard to say, but I think maybe for the Bills, being 3-1, they're still ahead in the AFC East. Maybe it was good for them right now to kind of lose a game right now, because you don't want to be too high they don't want to be too high upon themselves and then be having a bigger disappointment down the line. And looking at some other teams right now, what else? How about the Jets? 10-9. How do you lose a game with the Broncos in the first half of that game only had -7 yards, and in the second half, they still beat you? The Jets are one-dimensional. They clearly are not clicking. And you would think that with Aaron Rodgers finally healthy, he's not the same guy. Obviously, his Achilles injury really is not, he's not the same person anymore. And the Jets now are starting to become the same old Jets, even with Aaron Rodgers. And that's really, really just a head scratcher there. All right, my friends, let's get into week number 5. Obviously, I would have some more thoughts on week number 4, but obviously, let's get into it. All right, let's begin with key game number 1. Let's begin in the AFC North. It is the Ravens versus the Bengals. The Ravens are a slight favorite at 1.5, and I would say that's about right. Lamar Jackson was 13 of 18, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Joe Burrow and the Bengals were lucky to get the win against the Panthers. Are finally back into the win column. He was 22 of 31, 232 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. I'm going to make this short and sweet here for a couple things. 1, the Bengals defense is really one of the worst defenses in the league. And there's a reason why they were 0-3 going into that game. Obviously, their defense basically just, I don't know what it is. They just can't stop anybody. They've allowed now almost about, you guys can quote me on this. From what I was reading, they've allowed pretty much almost 800 yards of offense in 4 games. And when you have to face a divisional opponent going into this game, and the way that Derrick Henry ran over that Buffalo defense, and the way the Bengals defense is playing right now, I'm going to make this short and sweet. I like the Ravens in this game, and I like the Ravens in this game. The running game is going to and Derrick Henry are going to really run over that Bengals defense that's really having trouble stopping anybody. That's the reason why they lost to the Chiefs. That's the reason why they lost to the Commanders. And that's a reason why they lost to the Patriots. Their defense is just not good. And I like the Ravens in this game and I think that running game is going to really wear out that Bengal defense if they can't stop anybody. I'm picking the Ravens at -1.5. This one's kind of an easy pick, so I'll throw in one easy pick here, and then the other ones are going to be probably a lot more tougher than what I'm about to say here. This is probably the easiest pick out of the 4 games I'm talking about here. Ravens will beat the Bengals in this one here. I'm picking the Ravens at -1.5. Key game number 2, we go into the NFC South. It is the Buccaneers versus the Falcons. It is the Thursday night game. The Falcons are a slight 1.5-point favorite. It wouldn't surprise me if that number goes down to 1. Baker Mayfield was 30 of 47, 347 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. They basically embarrassed the Eagles last week. And that's despite the fact they lost to the Broncos before this game. Kirk Cousins and the Falcons, the Falcons won on a last-second field goal. Kirk Cousins did a great job of masterfully a game-winning drive, which led to a game-winning field goal. He was 21 of 35, 230 yards, 1 touchdown, no touchdowns, and 1 interception. This is a hard pick here because first place is on the line in this game here for first place in the NFC South. A couple of things I gotta wonder: which Buccaneer team's gonna show up here? Now, obviously, Mike Evans didn't play all that much last week, and obviously I think he's hurt. I haven't heard anything from the Buccaneers, but he really hasn't been playing well, and there's some things that are bothering him in his body. I gotta wonder if there is an injury that the Buccaneers are not saying right now, because as much as Evans hasn't been able to get some receptions a lot, Baker Mayfield's had to rely on other players, and as well as even running the ball himself. The Falcons really got into a football game with the Saints. And that Falcon defense, you got to wonder, they're having trouble stopping the run. And my biggest question mark here, if you going into this game, especially with the Bucs and the way Baker Mayfield has got that offense going for the Bucs, I'm leaning towards the Buccaneers here. I think the Buccaneers have a slightly better offense than the Falcons do. And I'm picking the Buccaneers in this one here. I think with the way that Baker Mayfield has got that team going, has really got that offense really clicking here. I like the Buccaneers in this game. It's going to be a close game, but I think the Buccaneers will barely squeak out a victory against the Falcons here. I'm going to pick the Buccaneers at +1.5. I like the Bucs in this one here. Bucs over the Falcons. Key game number 3. It is the Jets versus the Vikings. This is the second international game this season. Game is in London. Aaron Rodgers was 24, 42, 225 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, in an embarrassing 10-9 loss last week against the Broncos. For the Vikings, Sam Darnold was 20 of 28, 275 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception in a game when really the Vikings should have blown out the Packers here. And that is one of the questions I have with that Viking defense. If the offense is clicking and has a lead, is the defense going to step up and make sure that that game is a blowout? Because the game had blowout written all over in the first half against the Packers, and yet somehow the defense fell asleep in the second half, and the Packers almost beat them. Now, you would think that, if you think I'm going to say that the Jets offense, if they click and all, they could get to that Viking defense. Now, to me, the Jets are not clicking. I don't know what's going on with that offense. They haven't been able to run the ball effectively. Lazard hasn't had that many hasn't been able to touch the ball that much in terms of Aaron Rodgers throwing it in the air. If you're the Vikings here and you want blood, this is a game you have to have blood in, because the Jets are not playing well. They're not clicking. Their defense has had which basically their defense has been pretty good in the last few years, but yet last week against the Broncos, they did not. It was really more of an offensive struggle than it was defense. You got to wonder if this defense is going to be able to stop this high-powered offense that the Vikings have. It wouldn't surprise me if this game goes back and forth, but I'm going to pick the Vikings here. I think that the Vikings offense, they have a much better offense than the Jets do. It wouldn't surprise me if this game is close, but I'm picking the Vikings here. I think the Vikings will pull away in the fourth quarter. I think they'll slightly learn their lesson with their defense, and they know they got to put away Aaron Rodgers in that basically convoluted or confusing offense that the Jets have. I think the Vikings will beat the Jets in this one here. I'm gonna pick the Vikings at -1.5. I think the Vikings will beat them here in this game. Vikings over the Jets. And finally, key game number 4, the Sunday night game. It is the Cowboys versus the Steelers. The Steelers are a 2-point favorite in this one here. I would not be surprised if this goes down to 1.5, but there are some huge question marks for the Cowboys here. Now, Dak Prescott was 22 of 27, 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And what do I mean by there's some question marks for the Cowboys? Obviously, they only scored 20 points against the Giants. It was a close game. But there's one key factor now, and that's Michael Parsons' health. He was pretty banged up, and his status now going into this game for that defense is questionable now. The Cowboys are saying he might give it a go on Sunday against the Steelers, when really they need him. And I gotta wonder if that Cowboy offense will finally click and get things going. Because I got some question marks on the Steelers side as well. Justin Fields is 22 of 34, 312 yards, 1 touchdown and no interceptions. Right now, Justin Fields has got the hot hand right now. And he's playing better than what I anticipated, and a lot of us have anticipated. And why would Mike Tomlin go back to Russell Wilson? I don't think Justin Fields is going anywhere. Look, Mike Tomlin knows he's pretty well in hand when he knows where to go with the hot hand. And if he does start to play poorly, do you put Russell Wilson back at center? It's really hard to say. I expect this game to be close. But the question marks I have between the Steelers and all is, can their offense get things done? Now, offense-wise, they played a lot better against the Colts. But in the first few games, their offense really was very low. They didn't score that many points in their first 2 games. Obviously, they scored a lot more last week against the Colts. It's a 50-50 pick, I believe, in this game here. But if there's no Michael Parsons at defense for Cowboys, that's a bit of trouble. And Diggs he also hasn't been playing well at all. He's also dealing with some injury. He's dealing with some injuries himself. And it is going to be, if that Cowboy defense has a hard time stopping Pittsburgh in this game, I like the Steelers in this one here. It's going to be a close game, but I think that the Steelers will barely squeak out a victory against the Cowboys here. It's going to be a close game. It's definitely going to be low scoring. I don't see much points scored in this game. I think both teams are going to struggle offensively. But I'm leaning towards the Steelers. It's really not a sure pick in this one here as I'm picking. This is a hard game to pick. But I'm going to go with the Steelers here. I think they'll beat the Cowboys just barely in this one here. I'm going to pick the Steelers at -2, Steelers over the Cowboys. Please check the description below for all of my Week 5 picks. I'm already over 60 minutes on this video here, so I'm going to wrap this up, everybody. That's my 4 key game picks for week number 5. I'll talk to you guys next week when I make my picks for week number 6. Take care and enjoy your football weekend.